In the spirit of collaboration, this is not going to be us sharing our thinking, our ideas with you. This is going to be a conversation. We'll start off by hearing a bit from the panel, but then we're going to get into a dialogue and hopefully really get some challenging questions and conversations from you and understand from you who are going to be pioneering in this collaborative world that we're going into, how we're going to do things. So I thought to kick things off, we really see that this is participative. I'm about to share a very powerful experiment. I happened to witness it with Dr. Deepak Chopra. Anybody heard of Dr. Deepak Chopra? Okay, about 23 years ago. And he says that your mind, your body, and your spirit are all one. So for me, as an executive coach, in one of the roles that I play, we understand that action changes the way we feel, changes the way we think. We often get in the other way. So we're going to get into an action conversation, doing things differently. That's sort of the output of today, hopefully. So this experiment goes like this. If you participate, I can absolutely guarantee 100% that you will feel happy. If you choose not to participate, there's a bit of crowdsourcing here, I can absolutely 100% guarantee that you may not feel happy. Okay, you ready? So participate, it's your choice, it's a free world. You can collaborate or not, up to you. Breathe in. And breathe out. I can see we've got some non-collaborators here. That's fine. Breathe in. Breathe out. Okay. Third time, we're going to bounce our diaphragms, and we're going to do the ha, 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 ha. You right? Okay, ready. If you do this, you will feel happy. If you don't, you won't. Breathe in. Dr. Malapu, I think that you were saying it's a little bit more energy we need here, so let's breathe in. Breathe in. Right. I'm going to introduce and allow the panel to introduce themselves in a moment. I think we're great privilege to have them here today. Working in businesses where the business model often are leading business models. We've got from Uber a highly disruptive model. We've got from Discovery a very disruptive model when they introduced Vitality and fundamentally transformed the industry in the way we think about it. And we've got, in terms of some advisory thinking from the Hunter Group, some thinking around how we can shape this new world and new leadership and collaboration. So we'd love to hear what you've got to say in a moment, and then start to talk about how this is shaping what we have to do as leaders. Particularly when we talk about two things that leaders need in this 21st century, that when I started in the world of leadership development, were kind of these new topics. The one, emotional intelligence. Okay? In the 20th century, you didn't really need EQ in a command and control structure. You just told people what to do, and if they didn't do it, sorry for you. But as you went through the Generation X's and you started to shift into Generation Y's, we recognized that people have choice. They have information, and we have to move them from have to want to. Requires a high level of EQ, emotional intelligence. The other thing, which was the subject of your topic before we broke, is in this new world of change and shift and constant evolution and rapid shifts in the way we have to think, we have to get into this process of learning, unlearning, learning again all the time, right? And what other skill did leaders have to start developing? We're talking about it, coaching. You have to have the ability to continuously yourself and take your teams through a process of learning and unlearning all the time. Emotional intelligence and coaching. Things that were not part of 20th century management theory. So, when we start, just to get us set up for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the evolving thinking around competitive advantage. And the way the world shifted is, the first thing is that there's been a shift from assertiveness to empathy in this new world, right? So previously, if you looked at Porter's classic competitive advantage thinking, you want to drive your proposition, your product, your service in a way that's differentiated and wins. Okay? And suddenly, things become more commoditized, they shift, and that doesn't work. We see this kind of Uber model where It's actually understanding and getting to understand what our customers want and then solving those problems. In businesses, you've seen that shift from trying to drive our product and solution. Suddenly we need to become more client-centered. We need to build solutions with our clients. We have to get this whole way of working up in the front of our business. It changes the business model. The second thing that comes up is when we started to think about this, when you start understanding what your customers want, there isn't time to go and re-engineer and reorganize your business and get your whole value chain aligned. You suddenly have to design and develop things in the front line, quickly and in a responsive way. Solve problems immediately. So that shift from, okay, that's what the business needs to do, now we're going to align everybody from marketing, finance, all the way through, okay, to ops, production, here it goes. We suddenly find ourselves in, we haven't got time to do that. We have to get our ideas out there quickly. We have to test those ideas. We have to learn to fail fast and shift. So that design thinking way of working changes the world completely. It needs different skills, different ways of working. And ultimately, the key in design thinking is you have to bring lots of different expertise into a room that have to look at your client problem differently. And that with those shared set of expertise, we solve and create different opportunities. Third thing is, in that practically, no longer can we organize ourselves in silos. So previously, you might be even thinking about your career now. What am I going to be an expert in? Actually, what we start seeing is the real skill is to become multi-skilled. The fact that you will have 5 careers, not 5 jobs in your lifetime. Okay, I'm on my 4th career, not job. Okay. And that shift in terms of how you reinvent yourself, learn, shift, and more importantly, be comfortable as a leader running and managing people that are smarter than you, that know more than you about a specific topic. So I can't be that expert in everything. So how do we break down those silos and start leveraging the skills and the knowledge that we have across our business and find a more agile and fluid way of working, fundamentally different. And then the last thing is we were tweeting and winning iPads. Laura, why didn't I get an opportunity to tweet? Didn't tell me. Oh, okay, sorry. Right. But in the social economy, it fundamentally changes the way we can interact with our customers, but actually also internally. So I've seen as organizations have tried to introduce WhatsApp groups, and they go, ooh, privacy, security, whoa, we get, there's a whole new set of challenges here. But the fact is, people have the ability to be connected real time, all the time. Okay? And the way that we interface and share information is fundamentally different. I mean, we're seeing stuff in our client base where people are having very different participative models with customers to give data that actually allows them to sell more to those customers on one level, but also sell them the right stuff at the right time. Right? And it's a different way of thinking because we're in the social economy. We're going to talk to a couple of people in the moment who are going to share that with us. Okay, good. So I wanted to set the scene. We're in an exciting new world, and Peter Drucker, to leave you with the last quote, said, in the 20th century, the challenge for managers was to set up structures and processes that will help us to commoditize and bring down the price and drive efficiency. The challenge for the 21st century manager is the challenge to manage and motivate knowledge workers. People have the freedom to choose, and you have to convince to share their special IP and knowledge so that you can leverage it up to create different solutions and opportunities. Wolfgang Grilke talked about us moving into the personal age, right? It's about people, it's about connecting. And we see the biggest economy in the world switched from a manufacturing economy to a services economy, China, in this last round. So you see the world is moving fast and in a fundamental way. So exciting. With that introduction, I'd like to engage with my panel here. So Kate, Shireen, Timothy, I'm going to give you, how long should we give them? No, I'll give them 3 to 5 minutes. You've got 15 seconds. Put it out there quickly. No, you've got 3 to 5 minutes. I've asked them to share a little bit about their business thinking, their experience of how business is changing, and then start to talk a little bit about their experience of how that's challenged them as leaders and how they're seeing that shift on a very practical level. Because I think for you as young aspirational people looking at your careers, what are those skills? What are those opportunities? How is the world of work and business changing? And how do I align myself to that? That's the challenge, right? That's the challenge. Great. So, good. I didn't actually agree with you who would start first. Should we start with you, Kate, because you are just closest?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, John, for the introduction. As mentioned early on, is that I'm part of Discovery, and specifically on the distribution side of the business. And I always say distribution is the heartbeat of a business, because you can come up with the best products, but if you can't take it to market, it really is a meaningless process. So I've been in distribution for just over 11 years, and with Discovery specifically over 6 years. But the transition from my previous company to Discovery has been quite an interesting one, because I would definitely view them as a traditional insurer versus Discovery, which I believe in the market is known as the leading innovator. You know, if you look at Discovery, the proposition or the value, the model, the business model is built on what we refer to as the shared value model. And that's simply saying, does a customer get the return value in terms of engaging in vitality? And as you know, vitality is the underpin of all our products. But it really is one of the most important underpins, as it gives us and provides us with a lot of information which we can share with you as a client to actually empower yourself from a health perspective. And I think Discovery, or not I think, but Discovery has certainly been very innovative from the perspective, and in showing that what we've done very successfully since the inception of the business is that we've constantly enhanced and grown the innovative side of it. But in saying that, it does require a different kind of leadership. You know, you're moving or evolving from the traditional to what I call the collaborative leader, which is what John was alluding to earlier on. And the collaborative leader in our business is really about ensuring that we facilitate this kind of process of innovation. If you look at innovation in itself, it's very easy to speak about innovation, but how do we take it practically in a business setup? And I think a wonderful example in Discovery space was, you know, if you associate vitality, you always think about, geez, I've got to go to the gym, right? That has always been the perception around vitality. And the reality of it is that we had to actually pay attention to what our clients were saying, which is saying, guys, I don't really enjoy going to the gym. There's other forms of actually keeping healthy that needs to be recognized. And that kind of led to the synergy that we endorsed last year with Apple. It was interesting because as a business, we had not geared for the amount of people purchasing the number of Apple Watches, which kind of put us on the back foot in a number of examples, because on a business level, operational level, we weren't ready. But in terms of innovation, we've taken it to a completely different level. You know, recently we launched about a week ago, and we followed a very similar model to Uber in terms of how is it that we get a financial advisor in our space to actually start doing the medicals for clients in the most easiest way. You're sitting with a client, how do you get them to see the nurse immediately and get the appointment done? And we've launched an app now that does it in a very similar format to Uber. So the whole way Discovery has evolved, and the whole principle about vitality and the data that we have available has actually just empowered us from a business perspective to sort of develop this integration model. And the integration model is really saying that the more you have with Discovery, the healthier you are, the more likely you will actually get a lot of value, or what we call the shared value proposition. We've even recently looked at the principles of, you know, and we've done the research on it, where we've seen people that are healthier actually manage their debt better. And that's kind of why we're moving in the space of launching our bank next year. And it's kind of interesting, because if you look at the debt levels in this country, and the correlation between healthier people and debt levels, it's provided us with such interesting information about how it is that you manage your whole life, not just how well you are in terms of fitness and health, etc. So we're in a very interesting and innovative space. And as I shared with John earlier on, is that Discovery has done it really well from the perspective of, before we went abroad, you know, we've gone into some incredible JVs, and we've also made some incredible mistakes. We've got the foundation in terms of innovation, operations, and everything done within our local business, and we've replicated those models internationally and globally. And we've gone into some incredible JVs with, for example, like AIA and Ping An, etc. But what is amazing is that a country like South Africa can actually take an interesting concept like vitality to the world, and we've done so very successfully. So that's us in a nutshell from an innovative perspective.
So Kate, maybe you could just share with us, what do you think, from your experiences, the kind of real challenge that you face as a leader? Because it's a great idea, And it's a wonderful concept, but actually
Yes.
bringing that change in, working differently, I mean, is there anything that you've noticed?
You see, the culture at Discovery is really not a top-down approach. So we don't sort of say this is the strategy, and then you've got to roll out the strategy, because we do pay attention, especially coming from the distribution side. If we don't pay attention to what works and what doesn't work for a client, we ain't going to sell anything. So from a leadership perspective, the solutions of taking our product to market, or the solutions in terms of driving innovation, really does come from the bottom. But the leadership allows for it. It's not just a traditional approach of saying, this is the mandate, this is how it works, and you've got to just act with it. So that's why I believe that Discovery is quite different in that way. We don't follow your traditional insurers. It doesn't take us long to get a decision done. And I think in leadership, you have to be able to make those decisions that holds you accountable for it, and also to facilitate the change in business. And a simple example, we had a conversation this morning at a panel discussion that I had, is how do we actually allow people the flexibility in terms of work? If you look at technology today, you can work from anywhere. It doesn't mean that you have to be at the office from 8 to 4:30. And as leaders, we need to acknowledge that it's actually just about the output that we need to achieve versus just physically being present, because you can be physically present and not achieve anything. So I think our mindset as leaders needs to evolve in order for us to be more productive, and also to allow people to be more productive.
Thanks, Kate. I think you bring up two such fundamental things. The one is the ability to make decisions from the front line and how you organize yourself. And I think lots of organizations that didn't start in the 20th, 21st century struggle with that.
Correct.
So, and the second thing is around a different way of managing your workforce in terms of productivity and engagement. And I think those are key challenges. Right?
Yeah.
Thanks. Good. Thanks, Kate. Shireen.
Good afternoon. Thanks, John. I mean, I just sat and nod my head the whole time you were talking, because really, if you catch the essence of what John is saying, you've hit it on the button. And I'm out there with SME every day. I think in terms of a panel today, I'm going to come totally left field, because I really represent the thrust of entrepreneurs that are popping up left, right, and center across our country in the face of high unemployment. The Hunter Group of companies evolved over a period of 5 years, really. So if you think about it, we're quite young. I don't know what possessed me to do it at the time, but I started one business after the next 5 years in a row. And very fortunate that all 5 have been quite successful. And that has given me a lot of, it's given me a bit of a public profile. I try to avoid, mostly. I'm not often found in terms of social media and cyberspace. A lot of the way that we've evolved is strong referral and word of mouth. And I always say to people, if you want to know more about my business, I'm happy to come and see you. So we're largely relationship driven in terms of how all 5 businesses have evolved. There's a cyberspace out there that is very easy to get lost in as a small, medium-sized business. And I've personally found that the more personal relationship and contact is obviously what has been largely the contributing success of the companies in Hunter Group. In terms of collaborative work, I mean, the biggest gap that I saw, and I come out of a very strong, structured corporate environment. I was out of Bidvest Stables. I was with them for over a decade, and largely involved with turning business around when it was in trouble. So that was really the fundamental impression that was left in my career development quite early on. In terms of tertiary education, I went through law and psychology, and then through theology, continuously searching for answers to questions that often people couldn't answer. But really, my focus is really on, I always put myself personally in the customer's shoes, and that's how I've grown every one of our companies. It's with the compassion. You said empathy. You said that, empathy is a growing trend, and it absolutely is. If you put yourself in the shoes of the customer and you ask yourself how you would be treated, that is essentially how you should drive your strategy. How would you like to be treated? And it sounds like a very simple thing to say in a room full of very intelligent people, but I can tell you now, I'm dealing with businesses that are in trouble every single day, new businesses out the blocks that are overlooking the most fundamental truth, which is, what is it that the customer wants? What is it that the customer wants? How would the customer like to be treated? And so it was on that premise, really, that the Hunter Group of companies has evolved and has grown. Collaboration is absolutely under the essence of what we do. one of the latest businesses that we've established, Outsourced Professional Services, does exactly that. And you were speaking about being multi-skilled and having a whole lot of different roles to play in businesses. But the truth is that you can't really do that, especially when you're an SME. You don't have all the skill sets, you don't have the insights and the answers, and you don't always have those resources within your own business if you're an SME. And so we've seen the gap in that market specifically. And so we do relatively affordable outsourced professional services, HR, IT, and marketing, and strategic direction, so that people don't have to employ more. Many times I'm called into companies when it's almost too late to fix the problem. And if you have to fix the problem, you have to fix it very quickly. So generally, the first thing that goes is your human resources. It's your people that go. And in the face of that, when you most need professional skills and professional advice, there's a huge gap that's left with the SME. And so that is really how we've developed the Hunter Group of companies.
Great. Have you had to sort of pick one of those skills for leaders? What do you think is most important?
For a leader?
In this space?
Truth. Because, you can collaborate around the table, but if you don't face the truths, the real hard questions, the absolutes, what is really wrong in this business, how do we fix it, where do we make sacrifice, where do we make compromise, then I think it's a relatively fruitless exercise. I think you've got to have a boldness and a courage so that when you enter into that collaborative process, that you are prepared to actually speak the truth and hear the truth. I think that's quite important.
And I think that's one of the, sometimes not always easy. So you talked about empathy earlier, but actually
Yes.
the willingness to engage and really hear what your customers are saying,
Exactly.
or what people in the business are telling you.
Exactly.
Tough.
Yes, it's
It's
two-way
a nice idea,
communication.
but not always easy, right?
That's right.
Courage to hear the truth. Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Shireen. Right, Timothy, last but not least.
Cool.
You
Thank
said you were going to sing a song for us, right?
I don't remember that. Cool, thank you. So I lead our central operations team for Sub-Saharan Africa at Uber. We have 11 cities in 6 different countries at the moment, and we're looking at launching a whole lot more going forward. A couple of things actually resonated as I was listening to each person speak. The first one just being about changing careers and moving forward. So I started my career at Deloitte, did articles, and was in audit and financial services, and then made quite a career change to move into a technology company. Everyone was terrified when I went. What are you going to do? What's happening? And today, just involved in the most amazing company at Uber, and just doing some of the most amazing things and learning so much. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing around collaboration is how we work with our city teams every day to build the business. So we have a very non-hierarchical model where we make sure that we are working together with people on the ground rather than telling them what to do. So actually this morning I was looking at a document that actually had Accra Center collaboration on it, and that just talks to our culture of making sure that always that the best idea wins, making data-driven decisions, making sure that if you're not happy with something, we have this cultural value in the organization called principled confrontation, which is quite different to something that I'd ever dealt with before. Suddenly you've got your direct reports or people below you who believe they've got a better idea, who are pushing back and saying, hey, I think this is the better way of doing it. And that's so much of what Uber's about. It's about principled confrontation, making sure that every time we make a decision that it stands up, that everybody's happy with it, that there's buy-in from everybody around us, and that we move forward with that. And I think that's just how we're driving the business in Sub-Saharan Africa. We have a very flat model. We have guys on the ground launching these countries. We have support from my team. So my team does sort of 3 different things. One, we look after supply operations, which is getting sufficient drivers on the road and making sure that they stay on the road. The second one is analytics. So in an analytics-driven business, it's like a really important function. And the third one is just process. So when you're building a business, and I'm sure you can identify with this, out of scratch, you're basically creating the processes for the first time and trying to implement them. And being in a tech company, we're looking at clever ways of doing this, like using Python scripts and automating everything instead of hiring more people. Our go-to solution is always automation. and moving forward. So very different to where I started, but like a unique experience and something that just supports collaboration and fast growing, and I think that just speaks to the growth that we've experienced on the continent.
So, I mean, you highlight a massive trend, right? So data-driven decision-making, leadership. So trust the data. That's a big shift. How often do you feel people push back against the data or want to try to override the data?
So I think that's a large part of what I do every day, is make sure that we are providing enough data that we can always make sufficient data-driven decisions. If you don't have data-driven decisions, you get like hypothesis-driven decisions. So people just wake up in the morning and they decide, hey, I think there's a problem in Ilovo with drivers at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I'm going to message out to all the drivers and tell them to go to Ilovo. And that often can be the incorrect response. There might be no problem. The problem might be somewhere else. You might be creating another problem. And so we try to make sure that we're always giving enough data to the teams to make those data-driven decisions.
Yeah. And I think that's a trend. I mean, I think Discovery has a very similar focus, right? You've really got your customers to participate in providing you with data. The Apple Watches, there must be the most amazing data collection point.
Absolutely. I mean, it gives you the power as a client to kind of determine whether you're going to live healthily or not, whether you're going to make the right choices. And I think with the whole principle of vitality, it encourages the right kind of behavior by making sure that your choices are actually recognized and rewarded. I mean, that's essentially what vitality is about, is we're rewarding the right behavior to ensure that you live a healthier life. I mean, the core of our business is really about creating a nation of healthier people. That's essentially what it is. And the data that we have with vitality, or let's just assume that if the client does not have vitality but has got a health product with us, the information that we have about that particular individual is amazing. It's incredible. It allows you to manage your risk. It allows us to manage our risk and actually provide you with a better product and a better shared value proposition.
And I think that, for me, is a very fundamental shift in the world of business, right? You're looking at the two new business models. So vitality is really about data that drives you to manage your risk more effectively. It's behavioral economics.
Correct.
Right? So it's connecting with people and trying to shape behavior and encourage them to participate in that process. And the same thing with Uber, trying to get your drivers and your customers to participate in the process. They share information, you can enhance the experience. It's one of the challenges you face, right, as a new leader, is how do you encourage your customers to share their experience and their information, and what do you do with it? Great, thanks very much. So with that, I'm going to shift gear. I think that's a preamble. My colleague Trevor, where are you? Okay, my colleague Trevor is no longer here. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is, you're currently sitting. I'm going to ask you to stand again. When you stand, I'd like you to move and either go and join up with another table. So there's sort of 4 of you here. Maybe make that a bigger table. There's 4 of you here. See if you can join up with those. So we get sort of fuller tables. The 3 of you sitting out there, the 4 of you there. The 4 of you sitting at the back there ignoring me right now, head down. You're the one. If you just kind of come in a little bit, make slightly fuller tables. Just do that quickly. Don't you hate it? Change management. It's a terrible thing. Also another skill. Join up. Let's feel the love. Thanks, guys. That was good. Huh? Yeah, they're here. So that's good. Cool. Right. So I'm going to give you 7 minutes. Why 7? Why not 10? Why not 5? So you've got to be a little bit disruptive with your instructions. If you say to people 5 minutes is kind of a generalized time frame, right? 10 minutes. But if you say to people 7 minutes and 30 seconds, they pay attention, right? It registers. Another little skill. Just saying, okay, I need you at your table to formulate the most exceptionally wonderful question for this panel. One exceptional question. What do you think we should be asking ourselves as future leaders or current leaders or aspirant leaders in terms of what we need to do as leaders how we need to evolve. And this is not just a question to the panel, this is a question to the entire room, right? What do you think we should be asking ourselves about shifting, moving, changing, evolving, learning, unlearning? For me, we sit in most of my client organizations, they all want to be customer-centered if they're in a B2C business. But wow, it's a big change. We're not organized like that. Our business model doesn't talk to that, okay? It's fundamentally challenging. How do we do that? So we see that, and then there's all these new opportunities that emerge, right? So you listen to Shireen about being an entrepreneur, starting up. By default, entrepreneurs are quite tuned in and empathetic to customers. But you lose that along the way. So what do you think we should be asking ourselves, businesses, and we can create the dialogue? So the most wonderful, fantastic, awesome question. You have 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Ready? So this is my colleague Trevor.
Good afternoon. Oh,
And when I do these kind of activities I'm about to do now, often when I participate, I used to think they really are ridiculous. But then the more I did them, I saw it actually energized people and people had a bit of fun. So hopefully it is that. So the way we're going to run this, each round we're going to ask you to do something, and the group that does it first will get to ask the question. And my judgment will be final. All right, so the first group to raise all their hands.
yo. That way. Who's the spokesman?
Nice. Let's give them a hand.
Thank you for the opportunity. We discussed quite a lot of ideas, and we agreed on the fact that although Discovery and Uber seem to be very technologically savvy, and I'm trying to remember the name, Hunter Group. Right, Hunter Group is still an SME and, values more face-to-face engagement. The common thread, the golden thread, is that you all listen to the voice of the customer. Now, the question that arises is that how do we as leaders of today find the balance between what is today's or the customer's voice today versus us as organizations becoming anticipatory and anticipating what that voice of the customer will be tomorrow, so that we can either be responsive and adapt quickly and become very competitive and stay relevant most importantly.
I mean, that's an amazing question, right? Because being intuitive and anticipating the need, and not every business is going to be a Bain or a McKinsey doing all that research. So how do you do that? Lovely question. Yep. Guys, anybody want to have a go? Shireen, go for it.
Sure. I mean, I want to say this. You can't be all things to all customers. And I think you need to pick your customers, and then you need to serve them well. What I see going wrong with a lot of smaller businesses is they try to be all things to all customers, and you really can't do that. So once you've researched, the market and you know where your product offering is best suited, I think then you go full throttle and then you do the best possible job with that group of customers. But to try and do all things to all people is just a completely unrealistic goal, in my opinion.
Okay.
That's my
Yeah.
thoughts on it.
Thoughts? Any others?
I think the other challenge is that you've also got to have a very good understanding of what's going on in the world. Your research and understanding doesn't necessarily apply locally. So you might have an understanding of how things should work, especially from a technologies-driven perspective. There's a lot of other countries out there that are streets ahead in terms of what they come up with. But I think as leaders of organizations and businesses, we have to be very in tune with what's going on outside of our sphere. And I think that's one way to sort of highlight or help you in terms of anticipating. But while we're also focusing on the anticipating and development of new technology for the client tomorrow, it goes back to Shireen's point earlier on. You can't lose that touch, that personal touch with your client. And that's a very, very important balance in business. You can't be too technology driven. You can't deal with everything via an app or, and sorry, Uber's a wonderful example of that. But I know in our space, if we don't pick up the phone to a client and he's very irate and we keep emailing him, it's not going to solve the problem. So as leaders, you've got to be able to be intuitive about what's the right strategy for a particular problem or a particular solution. And I think for us, that's what we've worked on quite well in terms of balancing the innovation, but also staying very close to our client on a very real-time basis.
Good. Thanks very much. Timothy?
Yeah, maybe just from like an analytics point of view, I think it's a real challenge because if you're monitoring the data, initially you're going to see trends and they're going to be outliers, so you might be dismissive of them initially. And maybe talking to your point earlier about knowing like what's going on in the world and like sort of overlaying context with the analytics, when you're looking at those numbers, maybe those outliers aren't necessarily outliers, they're actually the future of where this thing's going. And I think that's like, as a business person and as a manager, you need to understand and like start identifying when this noise, what would potentially be noise, is actually the trend, and when you need to redirect your business and start doing something that's going to allow more people to do that trend. So I think picking up trends, especially in today's world, we have so much data available to us, and trying to analyze and work out when it's a significant trend, when it is the future, I think that really is the challenge.
And it's interesting for me, if you facilitate strategic conversations with leadership teams, they don't like to listen to those outliers. They fundamentally don't like them because they disrupt your business model. They're seen as a threat, and so we don't engage with them. So that empathy piece is sometimes getting to know your customers can be quite overwhelming because they tell you stuff that you don't like. You talked about truth earlier, and we don't want to hear it but it becomes louder and louder and louder and louder. So how you contextualize that outlier and understand it, quite a fundamental piece. But more importantly, allow the conversation. So for me, quite practically, we don't want to have that conversation internally. We want to push it away. So I think that's it. Because often your customer doesn't wake up one day and say, I'm changing. Those things start coming as little bits of feedback and noise, and they come at you slowly, 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 and we don't listen to it, we don't listen to it, we don't listen to it. And then, here's the trend. The world's changed. But it doesn't change overnight. There's quite a long lead, and we've got to listen to that. So I think that's a challenge. But I'd love to hear, does anybody in the audience have a real insight into that or experience? We'd love to hear that. I mean, I think for me, I'm very cautious that they're experts. That wouldn't be very collaborative. Anybody? Yeah, here's a point there.
Yeah, all right, thank you. All right, my voice is just too high. All right, I understand, especially when coming to this thing of hearing from the customer, it's very important on a daily basis, because I normally work with clients every day, and these people are the ones who are actually highlighting where we go wrong or we go right, and they are the ones who are actually going around our competitors and so, and seeing how they do things that we don't do. And the minute we don't do what actually they believe should be done, they tell us straight that if you guys, you cannot meet 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll take the business away. And now the ones on the floor has to take the whole information to management, senior management, to actually let them know, listen, man, there is a challenge coming up here. Then if we don't do anything, these people are saying 1, 2, 3, 4. You rather maybe go visit their offices and just hear the insights. For an example, there was a time where it was so cheap, where we had about 50 megabytes that we used to use at work, where you just log on and it's over when actually you're getting your emails and so. Then people were telling us about it, that guys, this is nothing, man. People are giving us 1 gig, 200 megabytes and so. Then at times we had to face and tell our corporate affairs executive and say, listen, this is what is happening out there. People are telling us of 1, 2, 3, and we are fortunate because he walk on the floor, check with us, and what are the new things that we are actually learning with clients. Then after discussing it with him, the following day we had 500 megabytes already, because he understood that the voice of customer is very important than anything else, because those are the ones in the field, they experience everything. Then if you don't catch a wake up, believe me, you will find yourself in the trash. Yeah, thank you.
You bring up such a fundamental thing for me, and it's a very practical example in organizations, and what you guys probably experience consistently, right? You get that experience with a customer, you're in that space, but then trying to get a decision or a change made. So here's the exam question for the next 5 minutes. In the 1980s, when they flattened organizational structures, why did they do that? To save money, A, to get decision-making closer to the customer. Now, actually, the intent was to get decision-making close to the customer, but mostly it becomes about saving money. So we change the structure, but we don't change the way we think, right? And that's so we design an organization because it's meant to serve a particular person, makes us more client-centric, but then we don't change the way we think. So lovely, and I think that's a great example. Good. The first group to stand up will get, yeah, there you go. You know what I love about this? That people do play the game. It's amazing to me. I'm just amazed. Okay, cool.
Okay, thank you. So the question that my group came up with is just in light of the issue that we're facing right now, especially as students, i.e. the whole fees must fall issue. Our concern or our question is that why is corporate South Africa so quiet on the issue? Why is it that they're not taking any sort of stand? And if they're not taking any sort of stand, is there any reason why they're quiet about it? Because it seems a bit contradictory to come to our campuses and basically say, we have all these amazing graduate programs, we care about you, come work for us, we care about our students. But when it comes to questions that come to, okay, can we actually graduate type of things, then they're quiet. So that's just the question we have.
Good. Anybody like to have a go? Yeah?
Because I
go for it,
have a view on it. So it's a very personal view because I actually inboxed the SRC of WITS yesterday, an ex-WITS student, and proudly so. You know, I was at the gym, Virgin Active, doing my little run yesterday, and I was watching what was happening in the media with the SRC at WITS and what they were saying about the fees being free. You know, sometimes the argument is just not an intelligent argument or well thought out argument. I'm not saying the principle is wrong, but the way that it was presented yesterday was very poorly done. Enough for me to actually inbox SRC and say, look, you have a great argument. You need to actually filter the people that make the point for you in the media so that it is presented in an intelligent way. I think the comment that was made through the SRC yesterday in terms of free fees was, you have to walk into the exam room and prove yourself. And I'm thinking, hell yes. Didn't we all have to go into the exam room and prove ourselves? You know, there is an expectation, there is a demand, and it's placed on everybody fairly so. And I think, you know, if it's not what they're arguing, it's the way that they are arguing. And I think from that point of view, and I mean, I'm personally very involved in doing bursaries. We've got bursaries that run right from Johannesburg prison, where we do bursaries for people who are doing long sentences, because I do a lot of community work so that we can educate them before they're released from prison, right through to the Jewish community, where we sponsor, you know, we do bursaries within our own organization. We're doing lots of bursaries. So the issue is not really the bursary. The issue in terms of the SRC and WITS specifically, and I know it's a much broader issue, is the way that it is presented. And I think from our point of view, it's, you know, quite up to a point, but I think that's something that needs to be considered, the way that these arguments are presented in the media and on a national level. That's my opinion.
You want to have a comment or thought?
Geez, I can't really share with you why Discovery has actually not taken a stance on it. It's a very difficult situation, and I think personally, I mean, my view on it is that we probably can achieve something similar by not vandalizing and incurring more costs as a result of what's happening. And I think the destructive behavior is not what I agree with on that level. And I think if a corporate takes a decision or a stance to support either one of it, it could actually cause a lot more problems from it. And I want you to sort of also think about the situation when we had a change of finance minister last year, and I'm sure most of you knew how much the country had actually lost as a result of that. And if you think for a second that a corporate South Africa did not make those calls to President to tell him that you don't have a choice in the matter, it's affecting our economy, I think you take a very naive view to it. So I think where we can control things, the corporates are very willing to pick up the phone and have a conversation or sit around a table and say, guys, you're affecting our economy hugely. The conversation around the universities is, yes, there's an element of fees and bursaries on the one hand, but there's also corporate South Africa that provides employment, and it's a different conversation altogether. So it doesn't answer your question, but I can't really tell you why we haven't actually taken a specific stance. But on a broader issue, on an economic issue, I know that we do take a stance on it, and we will get involved on that level like we did last year.
There's a question over there, or answer, input?
The comment, sorry, I've got so much light in my eyes. My name is Nkuli Bukhopa, and I'm president of the South African Institute of Black Property Practitioners. Now, that's a sector that's responsible for 6% in contributing to the GDP of South Africa. It's worth about 5.3 trillion rands. Yesterday, I was at the Black Business Council for their gala event, and President Zuma was there, and he responded to some of the concerns that were raised by business. But what I raised at the Black Business Council was exactly the point on why are we quiet as a business body to the plea of the students on fees must fall. So as she has indicated, business may be quiet in responding to the students, but we're not quiet at the fora where it matters the most to raise those questions. So in my view, I'm in the real estate sector, and I said it to my two mentees that I met this afternoon. I said, if we dedicated and invested more funds into our education, as much as we did, or remove the funds that we actually dedicate to human settlements, we will drive an economy that will lead to people who can actually build their own houses and homes and thrive better than someone you put into an RDP and then they have no sense of tomorrow. You know, so those are conversations that do sit deep within our hearts. We look at what's going on. We are not pleased with the vandalism, and I'm not going to sit here and say we agree with that, and that I think should be condemned at every level. But what Patrice Motsepe said yesterday was also, you know, if you have a population of about 80% of the people, 62% of which is young people, and all of those people are in an economy that is not thriving, surely something is about to come off the wheels, you know. So it is now a symptom of a bigger problem, what we are seeing in the country. 3.5% of our economy still sits outside of the larger population. So those are continuous dialogues that have to continue happening until we see the change that we actually have to experience in this country. We need a more equitable country, and we cannot achieve that when people are not educated. The problem we face right now with the big percentage of unemployment is actually not just unemployment, but rather unemployability of our people. So makes me emotional, but we are with you.
And I think that, thank you for that. We're going to go up to our next question, but I think the fundamental thing is it's a challenge that affects us all, right? And that the solution has to be one that's shared. So thank you. Right. One last question. First person, yep. There was a hand here. Go for it.
You've already had your chance.
Yeah, well, that was just about me earlier on, then now it's about the team. Okay, we just want to understand, you know, this is a confusing issue where you have two things that looks like they're in common, where you have cooperation versus collaboration. Then these two, we always find it so difficult that, you know, companies will always tell you that, no, okay, we are collaborating, and so, whereas in essence they are not. They're actually cooperating. I'll give an example now that when you have your mind and heart, if they are not aligned to one thing, then the other one get compromised. Then you end up the other one end up actually agreeing to do something that doesn't need to do. Then that I would call it cooperation. It cooperates because it's not actually fully there. Then in companies, they will tell you that, no, this is how we're going to do things, and if you don't want to do it, that's the door. Then you end up actually cooperating instead of collaborating. Then you don't become productive and innovative in the mind. I don't know how you guys can actually define the two, because I'm not sure if we're getting it right here or wrong. Then you guys, will leave it to you just actually to explain to us how to work that out.
Yeah, good question. So if you look at collaboration, sometimes wrapped up as cooperation. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean,
Timothy?
I can start. So I think at Uber, like that's a tough one that we deal with every day. most of all because we have this, like another one of these cultural values called be an owner, not a renter. So everyone's trying to own something that they're doing and not just coming to work every day and doing a task. They're actually trying to own it, make it better, improve it. And when you've got people doing different tasks or having different like KPIs, basically, different performance indicators, that can become a problem because exactly what you said is suddenly you've got people maybe cooperating and not actually collaborating for the better of the business. The one way that I look at it is to try and make sure that the team is unified at a higher level. So for instance, we run Sub-Saharan Africa as a region. There are multiple teams, there are different countries, there are different cities, there are different functions within the business, but making sure that we're all aligned on what that goal for the region is, that starts to drive that collaboration because it becomes less important about whether Lagos meets their performance indicators versus Nairobi, and more important that as a business we reach that goal together. And then we start to work together and you see best practice being shared between teams. You see functional teams getting involved because they know that that's the biggest lever to pull and that's going to get us to our overall goal. So, I mean, maybe that's a start.
Yeah. So how you actually set it up, and actually it starts to talk about the ethos that's in the business. Because I think we talk, but I think your point is sometimes we speak it, but we don't practice it. Yeah, thoughts?
You know, my view is that if your personal value system is not to be a sort of collaborator, I think automatically, especially if the organizational objective is to actually facilitate that kind of leadership in the business. But it's really brought down to the most simplistic perspective. I don't think it's a complicated process, is that really how do you communicate? How do you engage your team in terms of finding a solution? And as leaders, we've got to guard against sort of giving the solution to the individual and saying this is how it works. So I think the principle is really around if you want to consciously drive collaboration, you've got to really consciously take an approach that actually allows and facilitates that process in your own space. And it's important to understand that as leaders of organizations, you've got to evolve. You can't have a traditional approach and think that you can still be a collaborator by having a mindset of being a traditional leader versus a collaborator. And it's something that I ask myself on a very regular basis. I went through a transition with my own business 3 years ago where a lot of the older and sort of traditional way of doing business and individuals that were part of my team left and moved on. And the type of individual that I looked for specifically was really around the young, and I say young, not necessarily in age, but in terms of thinking, that will understand that I want to see the innovation coming through, and I want to see a different way of doing business. And that's interesting because as leaders, we employ people that we want to facilitate in whatever leadership style we want to. And I think as a business, you've got to be very conscious of it, and as an individual, you've got to ask yourself that question on a daily basis. Are you a collaborator or are you just a conformist? And if you're a true collaborator, you need to question things around you, but not in a negative way, in a really positive way by getting the best solution in terms of whatever the outcome is or whatever the problem is. And that's just my view on it.
Good. And thank you very much. Is there anybody from the audience like to make a comment on that? Just a little bit of personal experience. I have one simple asset test. Do you have a vision or do you have a shared purpose? And in the baby boomer culture, they talked about visions. And that's somebody's vision, and then we all got to be motivated to follow their vision. That was leadership. Today, it's actually about a shared purpose, which is how do we collectively build a sense of where we want to go and what our mission is. So if you look at the Fees Must Fall, or whatever it is, that sense of united purpose that then people organize around and evolve around. So that shift, but in organizations, that's quite a challenge. How do you build shared purpose, not somebody's vision? And that's my asset test often when you start talking to collaboration, because that's at the heart of it. I'd like to thank the panelists for their time and joining us this afternoon. I'm going to give you just a last shout. So who would like to sort of, anything you would like to share in closing?
I just think if you want to operate successfully in business and you want to sort of evolve as an individual, you've got to understand that you can't operate as a silo. You know, if you look at the most simplistic version is, be it a small to medium enterprise to a large corporate or whatever organization you're trying to build, you can't successfully build a business if you think that it's a top-down approach. You know, this is the solution and this is how it is. So it's important that you start asking those deep questions about what is your leadership style, and have you started evolving to actually embrace the changes that have come through. And a simple example would be, you know, you can either share a view that you either allow your team to be on social media or not. You could have a view that, you know what, they're wasting time or not. And the reality of it is that information is shared so quickly today, and social media is one of the ways of doing it. So you've got to just be consistent, and as a leader you've got to be authentic, but also just make sure that you evolve to stay relevant in whatever space that you're operating in.
Right. Thank you. Shireen.
You know, I would say being a good listener. We talk about listening to the customer, but I want to say sometimes the best ideas come from the people that you work with every day in the office next door to you. And often the indicators are given by the people that are employed by your company long before you hear from the customer, because they're engaging with the customers on an operational level. You know, and we tend to, familiarity creeps in and we switch off to one another. There's the saying that goes, a prophet is never welcome in his own hometown. It's a truth. And I think we've got to guard against that familiarity, because often the great ideas and the red flags come up first within our family, you know, of business. The other thing that I've done that is relatively unconventional is I have a theory that I have no competitors. In other words, I engage with people who are in the same industry with me, that sell the same product, that sell the same service. I've built friendships up with these people. We socialize together, we share ideas and information without any threat of one business affecting the other. And we give each other relatively high amounts of support. So I've tried in the industries that we are in to disarm pride and disarm the sense of competitiveness, and actually share ideas and information so that we protect the industry that we're in, and that we together, in a united way, can move those industries forward. So,
Good,
I'll say
thank
that.
you. Timothy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo your sentiments of listening. As a manager, that's something that I found is the most important thing. Making sure you have happy people below you who want to come to work, who are hugely motivated, and to have good, understand the vision, enables them to make really good decisions every day. And if I do one thing, or I try to do one thing every day, it's give them that vision and give them that focus that enables them to make those decisions, so that they don't have to come to a hierarchical structure to try and get approval. They make the decisions before they even reach me, and we know we're aligned because we're on the same page, we've set that vision, and we're working together as a team. So listening to them is super important. I'm very lucky. I have a team of really well-qualified guys and girls working with me, and we have a lot of fun at work, but a lot of the great ideas and a lot of my own personal learning actually comes from my own team.
Right. So I think that's a great way to end. I think for me the simple thing is that charisma is built through your ability to listen and make people feel important, not in terms of making them feel you're important. You deliver as a leader because of the smartness and the wisdom in your team and the ability for what they can do, not how smart and wise you are and what you can do. And I think that leverage point for leadership is so critical. So in this world of work, with people that are smarter, bring different skills, different knowledge, that ability to collaborate and leverage and harness that knowledge is really a skill. And the listening, so nice end. Thank you. Thank you to my panel. Thank you to you. Sorry we didn't get to all your questions. The conversation kind of carried on. We've been going, believe it or not, for an hour and 20 minutes. So good. Thank you. I'm going to now hand over.